Hello fellow modelers, Bruce here. What I'm working on today is an old Ahtearn Blue Box kit. One of the original, what we call shake the box kits, where there's some assembly required, but it's very easy. Back in their day, they probably put more rolling stock and HO onto the tracks than any other company. Their box claims they're authentic and realistic, and they're scaled from official blueprints. And what they don't have going for them is the details, like the ladders and grab irons and so forth are molded right in. What that also is a slight positive there is that they don't break off very easily. And with a little weathering and replacing the plastic wheels with metal wheels, they run very nicely. Get them up to weight, and they're good to go. If you look at this box, you see some red X's all over it, and that came from a hobby shop back in Ramsey, New Jersey, where I worked. That was about to go out of business, and they were dragging stuff out of their basement. And I found that typically the boxes that had the red X's on it meant one of two things. Either it was a kit that had been returned because of broken or missing parts, or it was one of the boxes of stock, and it wasn't only rolling stock, it was also structure kits and so forth, that had been on a shelf in the basement when one of the pipes sprung a leak and wet everything down and created a flood. And this one, because the box I can feel is rippled in places, certainly had some water damage on it. When they started bringing these up, and I'd stop there on the way home because it was right on the way home, they would bring up a couple dozen at a time, and I'd sort through them. They were like $2 each. And I picked up one heck of a lot of rolling stock for $2 each. You can see the original price back in the day was $1.60. But what I'm going to do with this one is to create what I call a coupler transition car. I actually had made one up back in New Jersey, packed it for the trip up here, and I have yet to find the box I stored it in. But I have some old locomotives that have horn hook couplers on them, on a type of truck where the coupler was attached right to the truck, and would be a real pain in the neck to swap out the coupler. So what I do instead is, to make my life easy, is to create a car that has a horn hook coupler on one end and has a modern, either McHenry or equivalent coupler on the other side. KD, probably in all likelihood. And I chose this Peabody 4-bay hopper as a transition car for a couple of reasons. One is, it's kind of a neat car. It is in the time frame that I modeled, the transition era. This is a kit that was built in, I think it says 36, and built in 27, rebuilt in 56. So, transition era car. But the main reason is I don't have any other car that's painted this color. This is going to be easy for me to pick out as being the transition car. So I'm going to put this little guy together, typical of the old shake the box kits. The number of parts are really minimal. Bring out the key parts to it here anyway. And other than some brake wheels and the couplers themselves, and you can see this has the horn hook coupler, one of them provided, and I'll put that on one side. But these kits that were water damaged, I find that really the only thing that I have to take care of is some rust on the weights and a little bit of rust on the coupler box covers. And once I clean those up, the rest of the kit I put together and then do some weathering, and we're good to go. So what I'm going to do right now is simply get rid of that rust that's on these weights, and it comes off pretty quickly on some 600 grit wet dry paper. And I'm not going to worry about getting it off 100%, just the loose stuff off, because I'm going to take advantage of this warm January day where it's in the mid-40s. Go out in the garage and hit these with a quick shot of rattle can black primer paint. And that takes care of hiding the rust, preventing it from rusting again, and hiding these weights, because I'll show you in a minute. But these weights can be seen if you take track level videos or track level photos of your rolling stock. Because these weights go like this, and even though the trucks go on top of them, you got to put the undercarriage on first, but you can still see these when they're riding the rails, but not if they're painted black. They blend right in. So that's what I'm going to do now. I'm going to run out, hit these with some black paint, and then you'll come back and I'll just show you how I make these cars look a little better with some weathering and a realistic load. Talk to you then. Okay, time for a little update here. Basically the car is assembled with the exception of the load and some weathering. On these Ahtearn Blue Box kits, no gluing is necessary. Well, minimal, I'll say. But for the most part, they were designed not to need any gluing. They're held in place by a couple of screws, one here in the center, which holds the underframe in the center there, and then the screws that hold the trucks in place hold down the underframe in the other places. You can see the weights are painted black, and I've done a modicum of weathering on the underframe, and I'll talk about that in a second, including the sides of the chutes on the side underneath there, and the truck frames and the sides of the wheels, outer side of the wheels. I've put on metal wheel sets, and since they were made in China, I used my NMRA gauge to make sure that they were in gauge, and they were. You can see that on one end I have a, well, this happens to be a McHenry coupler, but it's KD compatible. And on the other end I have the horn hook coupler. So this is the coupler transition car that I talked about. Still to do is weathering on the sides and a coal load, which I will do shortly and then finish up this video. But I thought while I was at it, I'll talk about two things. One is, from time to time I use a tool that I hadn't used in one of my previous videos, and I like to mention them. When I went to get my rust mix, which I'll talk about in a little while, I hadn't used it in, I would say maybe 2 years, and so it was all clumped on the bottom, and you can stir for quite a while and not get much progress. Or you can get one of these little battery powered paint mixers. I thought, gee, I'll never need one of those, and at one point at a train show or a convention, I forget which, I won this one as a door prize. This one's made by Badger, but there's other brands out there, and it is just a lifesaver. You put that into the jar and turn it on and just move it up and down a little bit. Don't bring it out of the bottle while it's running, or you'll have paint all over the place. But yeah, I would say half a minute, and it was very well mixed. And then you can take this end off and run it underneath the warm water and wash it off, and you're all set to go. So nice tool to have. Now my weathering mix, my rust mix. My go-to rust mix was, back in the days when polyscale paints were around, 50-50 mix of polyscale rust and polyscale railroad tied brown. And I use that all the time for my rust on the cars, on the side frames, on the edges of the wheels. I even weathered my track with that mix. Now that I still have a little bit of polyscale left, but I knew I was going to have to find something else. So luckily, Micromark in their Micro Lux line have rust, which I think you can see there, and they also have railroad tie brown. So, I mixed them 50-50, and I saw that it was a lot rustier looking than I was used to, because this rust is much more orange than the old polyscale, or it seems that way to me anyway. So now I use a 60-40 mix, 60% Microlux Railroad Tie Brown, 40% Microlux Rust, and I'm happy with that. That's what you see here on both on the sides of the chutes here, the underframe under here, and the trucks and so forth. Alrighty, enough of that. I will say that besides putting in the load and weathering this, I need to bring this up to the weight of my other cars. I've talked about weighting cars in a previous video, but since that's a very old video, let me just go over it quickly here. There's a recommended practice by the NMRA that I will include in this video that covers all the scales from N scale, TT scale, O scale, the narrow gauges, and so forth, which basically says they want it to weigh 1 ounce for the car as it comes from the factory, plus a ½ ounce for each additional weight for each inch that the car is long. So this car is about 6 inches long in real world, so it would be 1 ounce plus a ½ ounce for each of those 6, or 3 more ounces, for a total of 4 ounces. That's their recommendation. This car, as it came from the factory with its weights, weighs 2.3 ounces, not 4 ounces. So I'm going to add some weight. There's people who debate whether you really need them that heavy, but I think the majority of us agree, whatever you decide to use as your weight of your cars, the important thing is all the cars should weigh about the same. That helps prevent buckling and derailing and so forth. And I've had good luck with the recommended practice, so I'm going to get this up near 4. If I can get it up to 3.8 or so, that's fine. So that's between the load and whatever weights I put in. A lot of people sell what used to be lead weights that you can put inside. Now I think they're made out of zinc or something, but you can buy those. They stick on, or whatever you want to add to get the weight up, nuts and bolts, whatever. Alrighty, so I'm going to bring it up to weight, I'm going to add a load, I'm going to weather it. Talk to you again soon. Okay, I'm working on the coal load on this hopper car, and I took this is my typical way of doing it, by the way. Took a piece of scrap foam, in this case it's that packing foam that's a pain in the neck to cut because you get all these fluffies off of it. But cut it to about, maybe 3/4 of an inch thick, the right width side to side, put a slant on each side for the slope, and it test fitted a couple times, covers up the weights that are already glued inside, and you can see it's just probably 1/8 of an inch below the lip there, which is fine. And what I'm going to do now is take some ground goop, And you've seen me use this on lots of things before, mostly scenery. But I also use it to make the contours for a coal load. Haven't used this in a couple months and it's still just fine, nicely pliable. And I am going to contour probably just 2 humps of coal. It will be covered up with some HO scale coal when all is said and done. But it gives some contour. I'll stop talking now, you can watch, because I probably will speed this part of the video up. There you can see the 2 mounds. I'll let that dry overnight. Although I could paint it right now while it's wet, so everything is water-based. But tomorrow, at some point, I will paint it black. And while the paint's still wet, sprinkle coal over everything. Paint will hold it in place, and that'll be the coal load. Looking from the side, it looks okay, so we'll let that be. Alright, a little update. As you can see now, I have painted the ground goop and the foam just with engine black. Again, it's a Microlux paint from Micromark, and I did that last night before I stopped modeling, and that's dry now. And I am weathering the sides of the car, and I'm not going to do a heavy weathering on it. And as I was thinking about it last night, I said, you know, I'm just going to use some pastels on it. You know, you could have done a wash of a thin paint. There certainly were other options, but I thought, well, let me just go to my package of soft pastels. This is by a company called Low Cornell. It's their package 881, which I can recommend. It's 12 earth colors, so it includes blacks and browns, and I'll show you, and some rust colors and some yellowish and so forth. And if this was a black hopper, I would go with rust, but since it's painted in a yellow, I thought it would show up better if I just put coal dust on it instead of rust. And I'll just show you what I'm doing here. This is a very inexpensive brush that I have made the bristles down to almost nothing. And I take my stick, I'm going with the black, and I just rub it on there, and then I begin to work. I'm doing the top of the edge of the car, and let me just do an inch or so of that. And I think you can see the difference between here and here. And now, tipping it over a little bit, I start putting black up around the upper rim and the sides. Rub it down the rivets. They really pop when you do that. And in around the steps on the ladder. Kind of grinding it in a little bit. Now don't forget, these are not really chalks, they're a soft pastel. So they kind of stick like pan pastels do, pretty good on styrene. And just down this rib yet, and then I'll show you what I finish up with. And there's no need for you to see me do the entire side. Alright, so just a rough application here. Then I take one of these sponge makeup applicators, and I just kind of draw it down in the direction water would run. And there you go. Okay, now I'm going to do the rest of this car, and then finally I'm going to put the coal load in. I'll come back and show you what I do there. Okay, time to make the coal load now. Sprinkle coal on top. What I have here is a small container of white glue that I've diluted with water. And for this application I use Elmer's regular white glue. I don't use Aleene's tacky glue. I'm just going to make it run thin anyway. So I get it about the consistency of milk. Alright, and as you can see, since I have spilt things before, I made a number of these little paint holders. Run them off on my saw and then use a Forstner bit to make the hole in there. And then I just coat the entire surface that I had already painted black. This way, if there's any coal that doesn't fill up the hole, it looks black underneath. So, a good coating of the white glue. And now I'm going to sprinkle the coal on top. Anything that spills out will be on that white paper, and I will be able to save it and reuse it. And what I use for this application is Woodland Scenics number B92 Mine Run Coal. Let's see if you can make sure you can see it. Yes, you can. And I have a little spoon in here, and I start sprinkling the coal on top. You can put extra, more than what'll stay in the glue, because when I turn it upside down later, that'll go onto that paper and I'll save it and put it back in the container. This is basically how I do all my coal loads. Sometimes I start with a plastic coal load for those little 2-bay hoppers that companies have sold to fit specific manufacturers' hoppers. And I still cover it with white glue and more real coal. Alright, that'll do it. I'll let that glue dry for about 20 minutes or so, and then I'll dump it upside down. And you'll see this car one more time riding the rails, being used as a coupler transition car. Alrighty, talk to you again soon. Okay, here we are with the car finished. And you can see here it's the B&O car, the 2-bay hopper. It's got KD coupler on it, and that's connected to the Peabody car on that end. And as you come here, you see it's got the horn hooks, because this IHC, International Hobby, model of the Alco Sentry 415 locomotive, which is Alco's center cab, has got horn hook couplers on it, which are part and parcel of the trucks, and would be not impossible but a pain in the neck to replace. So I'd rather leave it as it is and just use the transition car. Now that IHC model is not particularly realistic, but you know, in the ready-to-run market for an Alco 415, it was about what we had to deal with. So let's just see this in action a minute, and we'll finish this video up. Let's see what we can do here. Well, that's it. So job finished for now. At least in the short term, I can run this locomotive from time to time. I'll just lift this off a minute and show you what I mean about these trucks. So there we are. Let's see, there we are. You can see that the trucks are attached, the coupler's attached right to the truck there. And like I said, we could do surgery on it and get it so that we could put KD couplers on it, but for now I'm happy with the way we have it. So that's it for this video. As always, if you maybe learn something, whether it be about weighting the cars or weathering them, or the coal loads, or the use of ground goop on creating these mounds of coal here, why don't you give the video a thumbs up, and if you have not done so already, why don't you subscribe to the channel. Alrighty, talk to you again soon.